Welcome to our fireside chat with Heather Green from 3M about driving connectivity and innovation in distributed teams. I'm Kev, your host for this conversation, and I oversee global partnerships at Miro. Here are a few reminders to help you elevate your distributed experience. First, all sessions, including this one, are being recorded, plus all corresponding materials will be available after the event. Second, we have a visual facilitator capturing key highlights and quotes from today's session, which will pop up on the screen as well. Lastly, there's time reserved for live Q&A, so start submitting your questions with the link provided in chat and upvote your favorite ones. So 3M is a company that really needs no introduction, but I'm going to provide one anyways. For over a century, it has set a global example for building a corporate culture around science, innovation, and collaboration. Brands such as Post-it and Scotch are permanent staples in households around the world and have become the epitome of their categories. A few fun facts. The company was founded in 1902 as Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company. From those humble beginnings, it now holds permanent residency on the global Fortune 500 list, selling over 60,000 products that can be found in homes, businesses, schools, and hospitals in 200 countries. I'm thrilled to welcome Heather Green, 3M's Global Portfolio Director for beloved brands such as Post-it and Scotch. Heather has over 23 years of experience with the company and started her career in sales for 3M on the West Coast. She recently moved to the company's headquarters in St. Paul, Minnesota to join the marketing team where she is responsible for driving many of the company's strategic brands. She often tells her team, if it was easy, they wouldn't need us, which has resonated even more in this fast shift to a distributed workforce. I'm excited for the opportunity to speak with and learn from Heather about how her teams can recreate the collaborative magic of in-storm brainstorming in this new remote world. Heather, thank you for being here.
Thanks for the invitation. I feel very honored to be representing 3M in this fireside chat.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the history of remote collaboration at 3M? Is this a new phenomenon or has it been around for a while?
Absolutely. 3M, as you know, and as he said, hopefully doesn't need any introduction. And that's partly due to the scale as well as the history of the company. 3M is a very global company. We have sales in over 200 countries, and we have operations in over 70 countries. So that does translate into, working remotely has been a very common occurrence if we worked at the company. However, as we were talking about, is the pandemic has accelerated the remote collaboration environment for us. And for many of us that were based in headquarters, we were all together in a room and talking to another country or another area. And now all of us have greater clarity and empathy for our international partners that have been working remote with us for all those years. It definitely has forced us to change some of our approaches to working and has put us on equal footing. I'll just say a couple of the challenges that I think that we've experienced, because there are some challenges and there's some positive things that have come out of this too. But some of the challenges are your ability to read a room. When you're giving a presentation, you often are kind of scanning the room and looking for that eye-to-eye contact or the body language or the energy to help understand how to be more effective in that presentation. And you miss that. And a lot of times those body signals give you the signal of when to pause so that someone else can speak up and so you can hear more voices. And you sometimes miss that too. Even with a video conference like this, it gives you a little bit more of an indication, but you can still miss it. So all voices being heard, we were talking about, both Kevin and I are a little bit newer on our teams, and building trust across teams is a lot of times easier to do in person than it is remotely. So all of those nuances we now understand of our international partners and some of the challenges they have. So I think that's a really positive thing that has come out of us all changing our work environment quickly.
Totally. Yeah, we experience the same, which is now having to do presentations and partner meetings, board meetings, like everything is done remotely. it definitely feels different, right, in terms of having to present, particularly in a room where there could be dozens of people and they're on mute and it's hard to, like you said, read the room. Have you found a way to, we're still also trying to figure out how to get more engagement in that type of platform, but has there been things that I have worked for you guys to sort of like marginally make that sort of experience, like you said, better for the presenter or things like that? We would love to just kind of hear your thoughts on that, because we're also trying to do the same.
Yeah, I think some of the things is having people turn on their camera. Now, I'm sure, like many people that might be tuning in, we've all read different things, and I've read sometimes that can add to stress to different people. And but I think what it has done is provide a little bit more transparency and trust building. As I was talking to my team, and they actually really enjoy that they see a little bit of people's lives outside of the work environment during this pandemic. They, visually know their kids now. They know if they have pets, a cat or a dog. And so some of this has brought some kind of authenticity to the team in some ways. So I think that's a really positive. I think the other thing is, if you are giving a presentation, to, have some pauses in there. Often we're very uncomfortable with pauses, but being okay with that pause to see if anyone speaks up, pausing to ask if anyone has any questions at that time. We use Microsoft Teams as a tool at 3M, and there's a raise hand feature. So if you're presenting, making sure that you're paying attention if anyone's raising their hand, or there's a comment feature. So that's another way. Collaboration, which this is a big part of the theme of this conference, is there's if you're going down that collaboration pause, you got to make sure you hear every voice in the room. So there's a difference between presenting, and there's a difference when you're trying to get everyone.
Yeah, that's totally true. I mean, like following up on that, I mean, 3M is famously a brand that's been powered by science, engineering, and ideas. We talked about one of the challenges being not being in the room, but I'm wondering if there are other challenges around keeping that like momentum and fire and speed during like remote work. Like, what are those things, like the speed of innovation? Like, do you feel like that's slowed down at all, or do you feel like it's either maintained or gotten better? Like, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm actually really proud of the team that I get the chance to work with. We haven't lost a beat. And we've been at a time where we've been looking and doing some exercises like mind mapping, where we've had 25, might even been up to 30 people participating in this. And we were looking at strategic intent of our business and where we're going. So that's a very highly collaborative situation. And we were able to effectively do that in a remote environment. We've also have done 5-year new product planning from a pipeline standpoint. I say 5-year, feel like in reality it's often just 3 years, because there's so many changes that are happening so quickly that is 5-year be relevant anymore. But we did this long, pipeline work for the Post-it brand, and we're able to effectively do that by breaking the team up into smaller groups so they could have more collaboration together, and then bringing all 3 groups together for some final collaboration and building on each other's ideas. And then another area, the Scotch brand, we actually had a new product created in 7 weeks. In 7 weeks in this remote environment. So really impressed with that team. And it was a fun project, and that was a kind of a new space for us, where it was a STEAM kit, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math that brought together. So when you're dealing with STEAM, you're now dealing with children. So that gives you another whole level of regulatory that you have to deal with. So there's some new spaces, and still from concept to actually be able to position that product in front of a retailer was 7 weeks. So I think, you mentioned fire, and I think one of the things that has helped us be successful is really having that spark. And once you see some really great work happening and people being successful, how do you share that across the team so that others can get ideas and be empowered and be excited about what's going on and what's possible? And then that creates some different different types of work that you see done in different ways, and empowering people to drive their business in ways that they see to be effective for them and their team, because they know their team the best. They work with them on a regular basis too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, like similar, like this common theme around, and it's great to hear that you guys haven't missed a beat in terms of, able to adapt pretty quickly to this kind of new work environment. And what's really interesting about it is we just don't know. It's not as if we know that there's like an end state or that we're going to reach this hybrid state or we're eventually going to go back to the office. So, I'd love your perspective just on with your teams in particular, like focusing on creating a culture of connectivity and being together versus this new world of virtual productivity. Like, how do you weigh the importance of it? I mean, we're kind of doing it in real time right now, but I'm wondering like how they're kind of two divergent ideals. So I'm wondering how you guys are embracing sort of the way we were doing things and kind of like how we're being forced to do it this way. Would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So collaboration is core to who 3M is. And as we were talking, I've been with the company for quite a while. And so it's a part of my DNA as well. And I think that collaboration is core as, we talked about we're a global company, so you've had to collaborate that way, but we're also based in science. And if we look at the company, science is created all throughout the company. And technology is not owned by one business. It is owned by the company. And so as a result of that, our scientists have this whole periodic table that are full of patents and trademarks of processes or product that they get to pull from to solve the problems that they're working on at that time. So that's just created a strong culture of collaboration or connectivity that's foundational to 3M. And so I really think that connectivity and that collaboration drives the productivity. So I don't think you can have productivity without that if you're working in a team environment, really. And I've often said clear strategy really simplifies execution, but culture will trump strategy. And I think, reflect on different times that if you didn't have the right mindset of the team or the right alignment within that team, you can have a really great strategy, but you're not going to be productive in executing that. So I do believe collaboration is that foundational table stakes to be successful in business.
Nice. Yeah, that makes total sense. And like I've seen the same, which is, and oftentimes when I was like, looking at sort of the next place to be spending a lot of time with the colleagues, like number one started to become the questions are around who are the people, what's the culture that's established, how do people feel around their colleagues? And I think that's, I totally agree with sort of the sentiment on how important that is above and beyond even sometimes, like you said, what is the company strategy and, what is their market share? And even above those things, it really is just how cohesive the teams work together. So that totally resonates. So you mentioned
Google's
Post-its.
I was just going to say, Google's done a lot of really interesting work about team and successful teams and what it looks like. And I remember listening to one podcast, and one of the key things that came out is, do you know your team? And so, building that trust and rapport and understanding them as a person often is key to having teams feel best and be most productive in that collaboration. So absolutely.
Yeah. And I like actually what you said about the benefit of actually having everybody working from home, which is like you get an insight into their life a little bit more than when you are in the office, because that contrast is very apparent now. Like you were mentioning, you can see where they work. You're literally either in their kitchen or in like one of the bedrooms, and you see pictures of their kids. You kind of see them in their sort of their original form. And I think that's there's something very humanizing about that, which is actually an amazing outcome of this, where like
Yeah.
it's not just about the work, it's more about like who's the person behind it that you're working with day in and day out, which is awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, you not only see pictures, but often you see kids or dogs as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, mine might make an appearance in here soon. So your team is in charge of Post-its. I mean, it's one of the most iconic brands of all time. So like one of the most iconic products. Like, I have Post-it notes everywhere across my house, and now in my digital life on Miro, I have them everywhere. So it's literally invading both places, physical and digital form. Um, but how do you think Post has been changing the way teams work together? Like, what are some of the insights and methodologies that you've uncovered? Like, I mean, you guys are, this brand is just so iconic. So would love to kind of like pick your brain on that.
Well, Kev, thanks for asking. I'm always willing to talk about Post-it notes. In all honesty, the brand has been around for 40 years now. So we just celebrated 4 decades this year. And as you mentioned, it's been a foundational product for brainstorming and communication. And I think a big reason why it's become so iconic is it's in its simplicity. It is a really simple tool that can be used in so many ways, and it empowers people to really express their ideas and thoughts. And as we were talking about before this began, because of the common size of a Post-it note, you really have to be succinct and clear in what you're trying to express. Um, so, where Post-it note has in business, where a Post-it note often has been very successful is in that collaboration and the ability for everyone to express themselves. And I think, that's in how you express yourself the best. I am personally artistically challenged, so I use words. I work with some very talented people in which they prefer to sketch out an idea. And both ways are highly impactful. When I was looking over some of our different insights, one of the things that I think really stuck out for me was the ability for everyone, for all voices to be heard. And that can be personality. If someone's maybe more introverted or takes a little bit more time to think, they get that time to write out their idea and then express themselves. Also, in different cultures, there's different hierarchical cultures, such as Japan. And one of the insights that we got there was that entry level positions are less likely to speak up, and even in a brainstorming situation. So if you bring Post-it notes into that environment, everyone gets a chance to have their voice heard. So I think that's why combination of the simplicity and empowerment of the tool, it's been so effective in business. So we have launched an app that really takes the product from an analog to a digital world. So if you've ever been part of one of those brainstormings, you have all the products on the walls afterwards, and you sit and type into your computer to get into a digital format. Well, now our app, you seamlessly just take a picture of it, it brings it into a digital format, allows you to bring it into PowerPoint, allows you to bring it into Excel or into Miro to use in your collaborations there. So the analog to digital is been very effective during this time of remote collaboration.
That's awesome. Yeah, and
I
I
think
actually haven't. Oh, go ahead.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
Heather.
I was just going to say, and we've also heard during this pandemic, some ways that people are using this is if they have a presentation, and they might actually put like their speaking points right up by the camera. Or if they have a meeting that they need to make sure they get these 3 points across, again, they put up by their camera so it stays front and center. They're still able to make the eye contact with the people and be engaged, but also help them keep on task. So that's one way. Of course, motivation. Keep a little reminder up of what are your key things that you need to get accomplished this week, is another way. And with our app, you can now put a reminder on your home screen as well on your phone. So there's multiple ways that you can keep in front and use the product, again, many simple ways to be productive during this unique time that we're living.
Totally. And we had a partner I thought was a really cool use case of how they were using Post-it. It was like it's basically a construction company that, normally usually puts all of their plans on a trailer and has Post-it notes to identify different stages of the construction process. And then when they mentioned the pandemic hit, all of that, they didn't have access to that because people weren't going to the trailer. So they decided to just take a picture of it and then move it digitally, right, with all the Post-it notes into a format where they could continue to work even though they weren't in the same place. So I thought that was a really innovative way to think about, what you would describe as a fairly, a business has been around a really long time, how they're innovating on how to continue going forward, even as something with construction. So I thought that was a really cool example of how they were moving forward in this day and age.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we recently, now, again, this world changed it, but a couple of years ago, we launched an extreme Post-it. So for those construction sites where they're working in Minnesota winters, which we might get our first snow on Tuesday, this is a product that can actually stand up to wind, rain, snow. So we've tried to evolve as we see those need states and as people are using the product in different ways, again, because of the simplicity of the product.
I love it. Did you say it's called Extreme Post-it?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
Right. We keep the naming simple too.
Extreme conditions. So that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I have one last question before we open it up. We actually have a number of questions coming from the audience, but my last question for you before we open it up is what advice would you give to teams trying to come up with new innovations in remote work?
Yeah, I was talking with my team about this, and I think what we've landed on is really there is, when you look at how you've been effective face to face in innovation, we really find there's more similarities in that in a remote world than differences. So look at when you've had the most successful times of innovation within your team and then say, what were those key factors? And now how do I bring them forward into a remote world? How do they translate into this remote world? And I think we've already touched base on one of them, and that's culture and trust across the team. Because when you have that trust and that foundation, you get better collaboration, and better collaboration, gets to more freedom to put your ideas out there and feel safe in putting ideas out there, which leads to better collaboration, etc. Making sure that you have a cross-functional team represented in this environment, or a cross-function of different levels of skill sets. You need to make sure that you make room to pause to hear every voice. And we have used some brainstorming where people brainstorm separately at their home. Again, use our app to then take the images and bring it into digital. And that way we make sure everyone is getting heard. So I think making sure everyone is heard is critical. Also, calling on people is another way to do that. If you're, keeping track, if you're facilitating that meeting and you see that there's someone that just hasn't been speaking up, or you're concerned that they're not engaged, call on them and make sure that they understand you want to hear their voice. Sometimes extroverted people can have dominate some of those conversations. And so in this environment, we need to make sure that there's equal footing on those hearing. But we also talked about that STEAM kit in 7 weeks, and what did that take? And it was making sure that there was a very clear brief, making sure that everyone really understood what that goal was, And we brought in cross-functional members, design and packaging earlier on than maybe we traditionally would have, because you didn't have that kind of running in hallway conversations. I think that's one of the things I miss most, is that triangulating of information to give you a bigger picture, a more full picture when you're talking with different people. So because that doesn't happen in those hallway conversations, you got to make sure that it's happening, whether through regular touch-ins or picking up the phone and calling or a text message, but staying connected. And I think one other thing is making sure you're celebrating little milestones. Again, I think sometimes it can be a little more draining working on your own. So if you can celebrate those wins, whether something picked up from Simon Sinek is, virtual high fives, or, making sure you're clapping for people as we see really great work, to try to bring some of that energy that you normally get when you're in a room together, I think is important, so people understand that they are celebrated and they're recognized. We have a e-card, like a peer-to-peer recognition system at 3M, that I try to use to celebrate people and copy their bosses, so they know the good work that's being done by their team, because it's harder for them to see that good work too. And then, of course, if you have it in the budget or the opportunities to send a gift, or maybe a Starbucks gift card, or whatever works within your corporation, is always another wonderful surprise if you get a good treat at home. So, but really, I think it goes back to the basics of what's worked in the past. How does that translate now? Let's not overthink it and overcomplicate it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And actually, like I've been, as you're mentioning that, I've been looking at sort of some of the questions that have been coming in from the audience. And one of them was what's really interesting about not only recognition, but also like speed of innovation and how to move faster with a company like 3M, who has such a storied history. And as you've gotten bigger and you have operations in over 200 countries, people are interested to know, like, what has worked well in terms of driving innovation. Has it been more of a top-down C-level pushing innovation to the whole company and trying to get everybody to move quickly? Or is it like pockets of innovation, like some companies have innovation teams, or they're just, they're pushing things forward and everybody follows? And I'm curious to see kind of how you guys have seen that transpire at 3M.
Yeah, I guess two thoughts came to my mind. We that are in the business are business builders. So that is our primary goal, is to be a business builder. As you mentioned, Post-it Note is one of the brands that I get the honor of working on. And our goal there is to really have great understanding and intimacy of how people use our products and how they want to use their products, and try to look for problems that we can solve, as we talked about with the construction example and the Extreme product. How can we solve problems that we see as we get closer to these customers? So it really is in the business, as far as business building. But as we mentioned at 3M, there's also the science and technology part. And so the 15% culture is something that you often hear about 3M too, if you read about it in case studies or something. And that is developed from 100 years ago and still exists in the company today. So if a scientist has an area that they're extremely excited about, and they don't have a home for it yet, maybe they can still take 15% of their time and work on that and develop that. So it's absolutely not a top-down culture. It is those that are closest to the customers and the business and the brands that they work on, and then the scientists is really how the company has been successful for over 100 years.
Absolutely. In terms of, and I know we're running up on our time, so this will be our last question from the audience. But you mentioned customers and getting feedback. What has been the best way that 3M, or one of the ways that 3M is actually gathering that feedback from customers and hearing where they want to see improvements? Like, I loved your concept. I never thought about the extreme Post-it idea, because I live in California, so the weather's not that extreme unless you're counting fires. But like, where are you guys getting the ideas for this? Like, are they coming from the customers? Are they coming from you guys? Kind of a joint effort?
Oh, yeah. It comes from so many sources, right? This gets into the beauty of what we were talking about is the triangulation of information. So because there are brands, we get direct feedback from consumers, whether in social media or whether customer service. So that's absolutely an input. Ratings and reviews now in the e-commerce is something that is absolutely a rich plethora of input. Social media, we set up Google alerts and see how your product is being talked about. We have agencies that watch and alert us on that. We also do primary research with customers. So if there's an area that's piqued our interest, then we will make sure we find many of those people and we talk directly to them. So looks like we might be running out of time here, so I'll sum it up. But the key is taking as many paths to make sure that you're getting the accurate insights so that you spend the right energy in the right spaces.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather, for awesome insights overall, and great to hear an iconic business like 3M is continuing to innovate. So thank you for your time, and thank you for everybody who's tuned in. Enjoy the final day of Distributed, and hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you, Kevin.